I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the various campaign settings of, well, Dungeons & Dragons. And of course, I've started out with Dungeons & Dragons Adventures in Space, Spelljammer. Let's continue with Spelljammer, of course, because guess what? We have the last bit of information in the current book we've been talking about. Strongholds. Alright. Now, in a normal Groundling campaign, your characters, if they really wanted to, could build a base of operations, construct a stronghold. They could purchase one, they could, fix one up, they could make one on their own. It's a possibility that's been discussed in pretty much every edition. But guess what you can also do? Make a stronghold in space. You really can. Now, there are all kinds of interesting and cool possibilities that open up for you to make some kind of complex space-based stronghold that you can do things far beyond what someone could do, let's say, on a planet, on the ground. But there are some modifications to it. It's going to cost a lot more time to build in space, and a lot more money. There's in fact a special modifier called production modifier that effectively is modifying the price of how much it is to purchase, to buy, to construct your stronghold in space. Now, there are a number of factors that are going to add together, and each one of them is going to modify your production modifier depending on where situations building around constructing of your space-based fortification, your space-based base of operations. If the conditions are very favorable, it actually might drop this. If the conditions are not favorable, which oftentimes they are, it's more expensive. So let's talk about the various factors that are going to affect your production modifier. I'm not going to dive into each one of them. I'm just going to be very general here. First off is the climate you're in. Climate is a kind of term that's describing the kind of atmosphere you're going to be in. But not directly saying the word atmosphere, because one of the options is in an atmosphere. There's also the void of space. So you can see there's a difference between air availability. That's one of the major factors that's part of the climate that you're talking about. Second is, of course, the geography you're building in. Geography makes a big difference. The standard, of course, is building on a ground planet. But if I build on a fire planet, that's going to make it a lot more expensive, because guess what? It's more fire than ground I'm dealing with then. So you can see that the variety of different places that you can build your fortifications in can make a big difference on the type of pricing it is. And there is a wide variety of places that you can choose to construct your base. Now, another important thing is the ground cover there. Now, there could be also lots of plants and stuff there, but the rock itself, if it's already been worked with, or it's kind of in a way that it is unworked, makes a difference in what you're building. So ground cover itself is a modification to this. Resource availability is also another important thing. If I have to ship in all my materials from another sphere, it's incredibly expensive. If I'm shipping it from somewhere else in the sphere I'm in, if the manpower and materials are close by, it's cheaper than, let's say, if I'd ship it over a long distance. It's also a matter of how much material is available, how much manpower, how much building material can I easily get. So you see there's this factors here of availability of materials and people to work with that material. Local society is an important thing when we're talking about your basic stronghold. Now you may ask, well, why would that be important? Well, that for one thing determines what you can use locally for your materials. It's the societies around you within the sphere tells you how easy it is to get materials from them, and labor. If people don't know about spelljamming, they're going to be freaked out about you trying to get them to work with them in space to build something. So you can see that's a lot harder for there. While if there's a lot of space-based culture there, it might be easier to find workers that'll be willing to work with you. And that's the differences between them that comes down to, is figuring out the society itself, if it's really backwards and kind of uneducated in a way to what you would need for your construction, or it's really familiar with space travel. Now, it is also, though, very important that skills and morale for your workers are not changing between space and the ground. So once you do have these workers from whatever location that you can sort of draw them upon, they're all standard. Now, some of the important details you're going to have to figure out about your stronghold, beyond designing it and building it, is of course the logistics behind it. Logistics is going to be very important for a stronghold. Where are you getting your supplies from? How are you getting air? These details are going to be very key to it, especially the air part. Are you going to have plants around your stronghold that are going to be providing a lot of the breathable air for your people? How are you shipping up all the supplies? How many people are going to be in this stronghold? These are important questions you're going to want to ask. Now, when we are talking about spelljamming, there are a number of features that are, because it's spelljamming, are added in. Docking for spelljamming ships, specialized new types of roof far beyond, and your place might want a rubble field. Effectively, a rubble field doesn't stop a spelljamming ship, but it slows it down. It means it has to travel a lot slower when traveling through this field in order to get your fortification, i.e. it makes it easier for you to detect incoming ships. You're not as surprised when someone tries to fly in and attack you. So you can see there are things that are logistically impossible on a planet, another kind of worse use of the word logistics there, that you can do in space. And always remember, food and water are also going to be key next to air. Didn't mention that with the logistics I was talking about. Air is the top one, food and water is the second one. Those are the key things to it. Then you can look at your fantastical, amazing components as part of your fortification. Now, though, when it does come to the docking, you're going to want to look at dockage. Dockage means basically how many places a ship could land at your stronghold. Where if it could land at a docks, if it would physically land somewhere, things like that that are important to note. It's also important to note that especially if you're out in space, most times when you have that atmospheric bubble, there's a certain point in time that your base will flip. Think of it. There's a gravity plane. I've mentioned a gravity plane before, but every ship and every kind of settlement usually has some kind of gravity plane associated with it. Granted, you could build all to one side of the gravity plane, but that means you could also build on the bottom. Fortifications can be two sides, and there are ways to basically easily transition between the two of them that make it a little bit disconcerting, that help you out along the way, that do exist that you can install to basically flip between your two halves of this. You can take advantage of your goddamn gravity plane. It's pretty awesome. Now, there are, of course, dangers in building in space, and it's up to your dungeon master about how much they want to use them. There's information from monthly types of encounters that would occur when your base is being constructed. Of course, some of these encounters can be used after your base is constructed, but it's more for if you want to add a little bit of adventure to the construction of the base, then you could definitely add these in. They're entirely optional, and you could just ignore them if you wanted to. It's, again, up to you completely how much in-depth you want to dive into the base building, or if you want to make it something quick and simple. Now, there is another part of stronghold building in space that's important to mention. War. Because it's another type of stronghold, you can go to battle with it. And it functions a lot the same way as any kind of war against a stronghold, battle, sieges, except there are a few new maneuverabilities. Bombing runs are an option. Spelljamming ships fly through space, so you can easily drop some kind of explosive device into a ship, into a fortification through its basically atmospheric bubble. It'll land, it'll explode. It'll be a bombing. A spelljamming ship could ram the fortress. You could have a ship ram the fortress. You could, of course, have some kind of attack upon the fortress's plants, which will actually sabotage the air of the fortress. That's an option completely that's there. And because it's space, you can have much more ridiculous weapons that you would not be able to easily use on a planet against the fortification. So there could be siege weapons far larger and more dangerous than what you would find on a planet out in space, just because of the nature of space itself. So that's it for today. I talked about strongholds, building your own fortification in space. I talked about the fact that there's a number of logistics to it, and depending on the options for each of these logistics, from its climate that you're having to the type of terrain you're building on, all of these modify how much it costs you. And of course, you're using a lot of the standard costs of building a base on a planet. In space, it's just that it's multiplied by all of these components combined to make it this fearsome and deadly number, which could really mess with you. it just keeps compounding and becoming more and more expensive to build. More and more. Until it gets to this insane level of construction that you could face. But you can build a base in space. And of course, there's always difficulties with it, and there's options that are very interesting. The difficulties being on the end of logistics. Air, food, and water. You're going to need them. You're going to need them for you and whoever else lives at this fortification. Got to figure out how to supply. Of course, there's the dangers of the fact that you can have people attack it. And there might be dangers when building it. And the fact, though, it's always interesting that there are things you can put into space, far beyond what you could put on the planet, that make it almost magical and fantastical. So perhaps you will still want to build that fortification space. But beyond the money, the dangers, and the effort it will take, it'll be awesome and rewarding. So, in the next episode, we're going to move on to the next spelljamming book, because there are a few more I want to cover and information from them. That's going to be important for your spelljamming games before we move on to the next one. Only a few left I want to talk about, though. We're almost done. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link description below. Regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.